Well, hello. I'm Claudia and welcome to That's Tasty. We have a great menu, kind of an easy menu, but a menu that you can really do a wow factor with. We're going to have roasted delicata squash, and I'll tell you in a minute what that is. Broiled, or actually grilled skirt steak and homemade chocolate pudding. So in the past I've always told you, if you want everything to come together at the same time when it's time to serve, you begin with that takes the longest. That would be a delicata squash. This is a delicata squash. They're small and it's part of the winter squash family. So inside, you'll see in a minute, it is an orange flesh, and when it cooks it's very much like butternut squash, just slightly less sweet, but it has that nice creamy consistency. So this is a real simple little recipe. We're going to cut it in half, being careful of course not to put your fingers in the way. Come on. Like this. That's what it looks like. So we're going to seed it. Just take a spoon, scrape out the seeds and the strings, and you have a very nice, clean piece of squash. I'm just going to do it to the other half. Depending upon the size of these, you can give each person in your dinner party 1/2, or you can cut it and give them each 1/4. But we're going to keep the skin on because for roasting purposes it's much simpler, and you don't really want to eat the skin because it's very much like butternut squash. So it's got sort of a waxy texture to it. I have read some recipes where they say if you cut it really thin on a mandolin, it would be easier. You can eat the skin. No, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so we're going to start off with a little sprinkle of salt. In my pinch here, I have probably 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. So I'm going to sprinkle that from a distance, from high, so that it distributes more easily, and a pinch of pepper. This probably had less than 1/8 teaspoon of pepper. Again, for your taste, adjust it. If you like it saltier, put more. If you want more spice, put more. We're going to take unsalted butter because I've already salted the squash. And we're going to put 2 tablespoons in each half. And I'm guesstimating, but for those of you who want to be really particular, along the side here, actually those were teaspoons. It'll tell you, it shows you the marking so that you know what a tablespoon is. So that actually is about 1 tablespoon. And I'm going to put the same in this one. Now here comes the fun part. A little bit of maple syrup. So I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of maple syrup in each half. One, 2, 3, 4. I already have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. That's an important step. I should have said it up front, but you really do want to preheat your ovens before you begin, because the process of cooking will start instantly once you put your food in. So we're going to go over and put these in the stove, in the oven, and we're going to forget about them until dinner is ready to be served, because they're going to roast and they're going to be delicious. I guarantee it. Okay, so that was your squash. Easy, huh? Really, really simple. So I just want to clear this stuff out of the way. So now we're going to start our chocolate pudding, because you want to get that set up, get it cooked and in your refrigerator for a few hours before you actually eat it. So I have a saucepan, And in my saucepan, I'm going to put a cup and a half of whole milk. Actually, this is a combination of heavy cream and whole milk. I'm going to put that in. I have a half a cup of plain old granulated sugar. I'm going to put that in. And a third of a cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. That's that. We're going to give it a stir. And I'm going over to the stove because now we have to begin the cooking process. And what you want to do with this is step number 1. You want to bring this up to a nice simmer. And all the cocoa and the sugar will combine with your cream and milk, and it'll be one really nice chocolate type hot cocoa if you want while it's cooking. So we got this on sort of a medium-high heat, and we're just going to stir it. Now here's what happened to me a little earlier. I was making it because I needed to test out the recipe. I can't give you a recipe that's untested. And I turned my back during this process, and the bottom started to congeal, started to cook. And so it started to get a little lumpy. And I said, oh, I don't want lumps. So you have to tend to it for a little while, babysit it a little while, but the whole concept is you want to bring this up to a simmer. So while this is getting ready to simmer, I am going to keep my eye on it. We're going to get step number 2 ready. Step number 2 calls for a half a cup of whole milk. And in this case what I did was I split heavy cream. I had a cup of heavy cream and a cup of whole milk and combined them, and here is the remaining half of that dairy combination. I'm going to put that in. We have 2 egg yolks. I have 2 extra large egg yolks. If you use large eggs, you want to use 3 large egg yolks, and I'm going to put them in just like that. I have a pinch of salt, boop, and a half a teaspoon of instant coffee. And what that's going to do is you're not going to really taste the flavor of the coffee, but what you are going to do is you're going to it enhances. I just want to get another thing of tablecloth. It enhances the flavor of the chocolate. You really can't taste the coffee, but it just boosts the flavor of that chocolate. Interestingly, you can also use cinnamon, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon if you want, which lends itself to a very, very nice flavor. I like the flavor combination of cinnamon as well as coffee with chocolate. 4 tablespoons of cornstarch. Cornstarch is the thickening agent, along with the egg yolk, that's going to turn this this hot chocolate into a pudding. And 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Now, I would suggest you splurge and get real vanilla extract as opposed to the flavoring, artificial flavoring, because there is a huge difference in the flavor that it produces for the food that you eat. So, we're going to mix this up. Another thing that you want to keep in mind, cornstarch. Now, I was of the impression that any powdery substance, it doesn't matter if you use a hot liquid or a cold liquid, it's all going to melt together. But cornstarch is a little bit fussy, and it doesn't like heat to melt and to be combined with a liquid. So you want to make sure that if you're using cornstarch, you mix it in with a cold liquid. So now we have this is all nice and put together. Let's go back over to the stove and check the pudding. See how we're doing here. The object of this is to bring it up to a simmer, and it's getting hot. We're not simmering quite yet. But I am going to stay here for a little bit until it does come up to a simmer, and I want, there's some lumps still of the chocolate, the cocoa, and I want to see if I can get rid of some of those lumps. So if you're interested and you don't want to make this into a pudding, this is a really nice hot chocolate that you have. So let me see. When it simmers, there's bubbles along the side of your pan, and we're not quite there yet. So I'm going to yank this up just a hair to speed up the process a little bit. So I don't know when this is going to air, but I think it's going to air fairly soon. But last night was the full moon, and it was a full lunar eclipse. I don't know if any of you were able to get outside and look at it, but it was quite a beautiful sight to see, because they also call it the blood moon, because once the shadow of the earth covers the moon, it gives it a reddish hue. It's wonderful. So we're simmering now, and we're going to go over here. I'm going to put this in the egg and cream mixture, and I'm going to stir it, and you want to do this pretty slowly. And we're going to put them all together. Mix it nicely. I just want to put something underneath this. I know you don't have to, but I do. So here's a little secret for you. I often wondered how, when I watch those food shows, man, they have the best looking gravy and the best looking everything else, and how do they get it? Because I don't know about you, but when I make gravy, it tastes really good, but it isn't the prettiest thing I've ever seen. So I'm going to strain this to keep out any lumps. And there is some chocolate still left in here. You can push it through if you want. It's not necessary, I don't think. So now we're going to go back on the stove, and we're going to bring it back up to a simmer, and we're going to keep stirring it so that it doesn't cook on the bottom before it cooks on the top, which I alluded to a little bit earlier. But here's the thing, if that happens, don't panic, because the more you stir it, even when you take it off the heat, just keep stirring it and stirring it and stirring it, and it's going to be nice and creamy and delicious. So the heat and the cornstarch and the egg yolk are going to all start to come together and thicken this wonderful pudding. If you can even hear it, the sound of it doesn't sound very liquidy. It sounds more congealed. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but cooking is one of those things that you utilize every single one of your senses. You see it, you hear it, you smell it, of course you taste it, and you touch it. So in that sense, it's a very, very, very sensual thing to do, because it utilizes all of them. Now we're starting to get thick, and I'm going to really concentrate now on keeping this moving, because it's starting to get a little bit lumpy, and I'm not going to panic, because it's all going to come together. Now I'm shutting it off because it's cooked, and I'm stirring and stirring and stirring, and then we're going to put it in the little cups, put it in the refrigerator. Look at that. Good enough to eat, isn't it? I'm going to bring a hot plate over with me. Forgive me for 1 second, because I want to clear this off a little bit. So that's pretty easy. That's making your own homemade pudding, which is going to taste a lot better than the stuff that you cook from a box. And it didn't take much time, did it? So that's a really good thing. So now we're going to put it in some small cups, ramekins if you have them, but just little cups. I kind of eyeball it. You can use an ice cream scoop if you want to make it all the same amount. You can use a scoop, a sauce ladle. Now, one other step before you put it in the refrigerator. You want to put a little bit of plastic wrap on top, right up against the pudding. What this does is it prevents that thick skin from forming, which, by the way, I kind of like. I remember as a little girl when my mother would make us pudding, we didn't know about the trick of putting plastic wrap on top of it to keep the skin from forming, and the skin always formed, which I liked. And I would eat underneath first and save the skin for last, which oftentimes had whipped cream on it, which was another good reason to save the skin. So you can put whipped cream on this. We probably won't. You can put some shavings of chocolate on top of it, sprinkle it with a little bit of shredded coconut if you want. There's a lot of things you can do, but I like plain old simple chocolate pudding because it's chocolate, and I've never met a chocolate I haven't liked, and it's pudding, and it's creamy, and it's delicious. Now we put it in the refrigerator for about 4 hours or overnight. So it's something that you can make on the day that you want to use it, or you can make it the night before. And that's that. Okay, we have our side done, we have our dessert done. What about that skirt steak? Well, here it is. While I'm talking to you, I'm going to go back over here and get my pan. This is a cast iron grill. Cast iron produces the evenest heat, and I'm going to put it up on high, so you really definitely want to preheat this. So this is a skirt steak. Funky looking, huh? The skirt steak comes from the underbelly of the steer, and it's part of the diaphragm muscle. I'm just going to go over here and get a nice knife. This piece here is approximately 1 3/4 pounds. So I'm going to just make one portion. And a portion, if you want to understand portion control, typically for a woman, 4 ounces of cooked protein is what you're aiming for. So what you want to do is guesstimate at about a 6 ounce. So I'm guesstimating that this is about 6 ounce, and in the cooking process, it will shrink up a little bit. Kind of funky looking, isn't it, huh? It's thin. You can see the grain here. It is not the most tender cut of meat you're going to find, but what it is a very flavorful cut of meat. So I'm going to just sprinkle it with a little bit of salt. There's little pieces of fat too. You don't want to remove the little pieces. If there's big chunks of fat, which might be here, when I use the rest of it, I will probably cut that off. But you want to save a little bit of fat, and what that does is it makes the meat juicier and tender. So we're just going to put this on the grill. Yeah, that's the noise you want. Could have been a little bit hotter, but not bad. And we're going to leave it alone and let it cook. So while it's cooking, we're going to make this simple piece of steak into a piece of magic very easily. Something called compound butter. And you melt the butter, or you can use butter that is pre-softened. In this case, I'm just going to use a little bit of butter. I'm going to put it in a mixing cup. I'm going to use 1 tablespoon. I'm going to melt it. This is unsalted butter, by the way. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put a little bit of salt in it, just a little. That was about a 1/16 of a teaspoon. A little bit of pepper. I'm going to put in some dried chives. So I kind of like the flavor of, ooh, I didn't like it that much. So we'll take a little bit out. There we go. So that's about a 1/2 teaspoon of dried chives. I'm going to put it in the microwave for about 10-20 seconds until it melts. We'll compromise. I'll do it for 15 seconds. Let's go back over here and see how my little guy's doing. My little piece of meat here. What you're looking for is some grill marks, and I'm going to turn it the opposite way to make those nice hash marks. So we're going to make sure this is still on high. I haven't lowered it because it's very, very thin, and you don't want to overcook it because then it's really going to get tough. But there's ways that we can make that go away as well. I'm being very mysterious today. So that 15 seconds did not quite melt the butter. So I'm going to put it in for another 10 seconds. While I'm waiting, I'm going to get my trusty Pecorino Romano cheese, which is already pre-grated. And I am going to mix that in with the butter. So we have butter melted. The chives are in there, and I'm going to put a little bit, I'd say a teaspoon of the Romano cheese. That's going to be our sauce. Now, if you want it a little bit looser, put more butter in it. I'm going to keep it the way it is. We're going to go back over here. We're going to flip this guy. We're going to let it cook. It's not cooperating with me today. While that's cooking, I want to show you something. There are ways. I want to show you what I do. I have fussy people that live in this house, and they like flavors, but they don't want to see the flavor. They actually don't like seeing pieces of herbs floating around in their food. To me, I think it makes everything look really pretty, but to some of them, they get very disturbed. So, this is 2 tips. This is called cheesecloth, and it actually is a cloth that they use to strain cheese that is being homemade, because you want to get all that whey out so that the cheese gets nice and firm. So this is what cheesecloth looks like. It's folded. You can keep it like this, or you can open it up and make it a little bit thinner. This is a coffee filter. This is expensive. This is not. You can get 100 for a whole lot less than a package of, what's in this package? 3 yards, I think. 2 square yards. Probably 3 times, maybe 4 times more expensive than coffee filters. So you put your herbs in it, your spices, garlic, whatever you want to put in. You get a piece of chicken twine, kitchen twine, not chicken twine. Put it in, wrap it up, tie it up in a nice little package. Put it in whatever you're cooking. The coffee filter allows things to the liquid to flow in and out, but it keeps everything inside, so you get the flavor without disturbing pieces of herb floating around in it. I use it a lot because I'm tired of hearing, I don't like that. And what it is that they're complaining about is the sight of the herb, not the flavor of the herb. And I particularly do this with rosemary because I really don't like the flavor of rosemary. Back over here, I'm going to just finish this off. I like my meat on the rarer side, so I'm going to shut this off. The residual heat that's in this cast iron pan, this handle is very hot. Matter of fact, my husband really doesn't like when I use cast iron grills and griddles because you're not really supposed to scrub it down with soap and such. A light cut is good enough. So there's a lot of juice in here. I'm going to move this so it doesn't burn. Pardon me. Back over here. I need a... Let's take a look and see how our squash is doing. Wonderful, wonderful. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to take this out. There it is. The squash. Delicious. Yum. All right, so let's get back to the skirt steak. The skirt steak, I told you, is part of the diaphragm muscle, and it has a tendency to be on the tough side. So the grain is going this way. What you want to do when you take a skirt steak or flank steak, which is also very close to where the skirt steak is on the bull, you want to cut it against the grain, because you can cut it very thin. You'll get that wonderful flavor without all of the toughness. And a small amount goes a long way. They often use skirt steak, I'm going to cut this in half, for beef fajitas. And if you've had beef fajitas, you know that it's very, very tasty. It's delicious. So you can use beef. Skirt steak is also very good for braising, which is this time of year my favorite way to cook, because it's an easy way to cook, and it is tasty. Braising brings lots of wonderful flavors together, and it tenderizes an otherwise difficult, tough piece of meat. Chuck is probably one of my favorite things to use when I'm braising because the flavor is amazing. I just put the butter on here and I'm mixing it up, and I'm going to take one of these little fellas and look at, see? Isn't that delicious? Oh, I love the fall. The food is so good. But then again, all the grilling is really good for summertime as well. So we have skirt steak, which I'm sorry, I have to take. And that wonderful sausage you put over with the butter is easy, and it transfers an ordinary steak into something that's really extraordinary. Delicious Delicata squash and chocolate pudding. So this is Claudia Donnell for That's Tasty. Happy cooking, happy eating, and I'll see you next time.